Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 161 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. On today's show, we have a lot to discuss. We'll lead off today's show breaking down the last two games for Virginia Tech men's basketball. How were they able to bounce back on Sunday against Notre Dame following a tough loss against Louisville on Wednesday? We'll talk about the latest regarding Virginia Tech's football roster. Hokie's wrestling 3 wins over the weekend, including a big one against West Virginia, and 2 tough losses in a row for Virginia Tech women's basketball. 4 sports to get through. We'll discuss it all on episode 161 of the Tech Sideline Podcast that gets started right now. Whether you are watching live or archived on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher, so many great ways to consume the Tech Sideline Podcast. We are so glad you could join us as we record on Monday morning, January 11th. We've got our normal crew here today. To my left, our managing editor, Chris Coleman. Across the way, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart. Behind the scenes, the best podcast producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart, and I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by Anytime Fitness, Campus Emporium, and the Southeast Regional Training Center. At Anytime Fitness, each new member gets a free fitness consultation, and a program is designed. Now through today, January 11th, sign up for $1 for the first billing period. Call 540-951-1340. Again, that's 540-951-1340. Ask for Tyler and tell him that Tech Sideline sent you.
Yes. So,
and if you're worried about coronavirus in the gym, honestly, don't be. Like when I go in the morning at like 7:30, there's only like 4 people there.
Right.
You're so not going to catch it if you go in the morning.
So
that's how it is in Blacksburg, at least.
So this morning's weigh-in was 185.4, about the same as last week. That's noise level. So I did start in the treadmill this past week, but I have not gone into Anytime yet. But I'm going to go sign up for the personal training this week, and that's going to start this week. We were really busy last week with setting the new office up. So
typically at the beginning of podcasts, sometimes, for those that have been listening to the podcast for a couple of years now, Will has a song lyric. This week, I have a song lyric for both Will and Chris.
I'm not going to know it.
Okay? I got a feeling you might know this one, okay? I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22.
I do not know that one. What era?
It's recent. For those that are our age in college and high school, it's a very popular artist. And there's a reason why I'm bringing this up, so I'm curious.
Do you know that one, Malcolm?
I'm pretty sure I do.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Wasn't the album name called 22?
Yep.
It's Taylor Swift.
It's Taylor Swift. Now, why would I bring up that song lyric today? Well, it is because it is the best producer in the land's birthday today. Malcolm Stewart is turned 22.
That was pretty creative. Happy birthday, you get a Taylor Swift song.
There you go. Everyone who turns 22 has a song to sing. Malcolm, happy birthday to you.
We couldn't send you Taylor Swift, so we're sending you a Taylor Swift song.
There you go. So we have a lot to get through today. As I mentioned in the open, we're going to talk about 4 different sports today: Virginia Tech men's basketball, football, wrestling, and women's basketball. But real quick, I also want to mention this at the beginning of the show. Did anybody have a better weekend than Cleveland Brown fans?
What would the final score end up being?
It was
fairly close in the end.
Was it really? I saw it was like 28-7.
It was 28-0 at the end of the first quarter,
and
it wound up being something like 48-37. Is that right, Evan?
I'm trying to pull it up right now. It was high scoring. The Steelers kind of came back, but that 28-0 deficit was just.
I thought Browns fans and Bills fans had to be pretty happy. I didn't see any of the Steelers game. That was at Pittsburgh. Or was it at Cleveland?
It was in Pittsburgh last night.
Okay. No fans at all.
I bet Bills fans had a better weekend. All right, it was the first time they'd won the division since 1997. And they got a home playoff game, and they won, and they got to go to the game. There were fans in the stadium.
Really? New York had fans in the stadium?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 700.
And it seemed like more than that.
Like 700?
Well, it seemed more.
I'm
like,
sorry.
Yeah.
7,000.
7,000.
Sorry.
7,000.
Yeah. Yes.
And they're Bills fans, so they were really, really good. And they were really loud. And they had a lot to cheer about. Didn't get off to a great start, but they won the game. Josh Allen's arm is just uncanny.
Final score, by the way, was 48-37. And one of the reasons I bring up the Browns is because beginning of the broadcast yesterday, Chris Collinsworth, who's the analyst on Sunday Night Football, said that Wyatt Teller is arguably the best guard in the National Football League.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think his PFF grade's the highest, right?
I believe he's number one.
I mean, yeah, the film doesn't lie. He's the best offensive lineman I've ever watched in high school on tape.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not shocked.
Yeah, I remember watching, and I've told this story before. I remember watching a Texans game back when Dwayne Brown played for him, and I just spent an entire quarter just watching Dwayne Brown just dominate some defensive end. And you watch Wyatt Teller, and it's the same way, just play after play after play. He's getting his block, and he's controlling the guy. It's awesome.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And there's a lot of Hokies who moved on this weekend in the playoffs, and we'll talk about that as the NFL playoffs continue on. All right, without further ado, let's lead off the podcast starting with Virginia Tech men's basketball. As we record on Monday morning, January 11th, they're ranked 19th in the country. That's tied with Clemson for the best ACC school in the top 25. That new poll will come out in Monday afternoon. It might come out by the end of the podcast, and Virginia Tech might fall a little bit after their loss on Wednesday to Louisville, a 73-71 setback against the Cardinals on Wednesday, a game in which Hunter Couture had a good look from downtown at the buzzer, hit the back iron.
Yeah, so let me interrupt and say Hunter Couture is 16 of 34 in the year from three-point range, a shade under 50%. If that had dropped, he'd be 50%.
And then he hit the exact same shot against Notre Dame last night with the shot clock winding down.
Yep, from the little V part of the logo.
That was a difficult shot. And you said it on Sunday, the Hokies bounced back. 77-63 win over the Fighting Irish. It's the first time the Hokies have won a game this season when trailing at halftime. So, Chris, let me start with you. The Louisville game, a tough one because the Hokies, it felt like they were playing from behind the majority of the game. What were the biggest differences from Wednesday's game to Sunday's win against Notre Dame?
I think turnovers. I think they still had a little stretch in the first half yesterday where they turned the ball over
really early on,
like three possessions in a row.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh my gosh, is it going to be another one of those turnover games? Like it seems like they all are these days. They settled down. I don't know the final turnover stat last night.
It was like 10 tops.
Okay.
Not all that many.
Now, at one point late, they had like 7, and I'm like, oh, this is much, much better.
Yeah, it's funny. I get the wrong impression. Like last night, they started out with some weak passes on the perimeter. They got picked off, and I thought, oh, man, here we go.
Right.
And you're right, but at the end of the game, you look
at
like,
it, and there was only 7, yeah. And one of those was like a missed dunk. So yeah, which
and by the way, one of those turnovers was Jaylen Cone running out the shot clock late in the game.
True,
that counts as a turnover. So that wasn't even a real
counts
turnover.
As a turnover. Now I did see a stat that they flashed up at one point. Now this is the ACC network, so we can't. I assume it's right, but we have to acknowledge the fact that it might not be. But it said Virginia Tech was averaging 12.4 turnovers a game, which is like 4th in the ACC. It doesn't seem right.
Doesn't sound right.
It doesn't sound right, but I don't know. We'll have to look that up.
10 turnovers against Louisville on Wednesday, and a total, as Will said, of 10 turnovers. And when Mike Young talks about turnovers, that's about the ballpark range of what he wants.
Was it 10 against Louisville?
It was 10 against Louisville.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so they are getting better.
It seemed worse.
Right.
It seemed like
there's always the flurry, right? There were the 3 or 4 last night, all within a 2 or 3 minute span, and I think it was kind of the same against Louisville.
Yeah, so Jaylen Cone should have pulled that trick of, right as the shot clock's running down, he should have passed the ball to somebody else so they get the turnover.
Like Darius Maddox did.
Yeah.
So with the win over Notre Dame, Virginia Tech 3-1 in ACC play for just the 5th time since joining the conference, 2004 to 2005.
Really?
So 3-1. Again, they're ranked 19th right now. That's tied with Clemson, the top 25 poll for the best of any ACC team in the top 25. And Jaylen Cone has kind of been the story of the last week, Will. I mean, a career high 23 points against Louisville, and then he followed it up with 18 against Notre Dame off the bench.
Yeah, so we were talking about him right before the podcast started. He leads the Hokies in points per 40 minutes. I've got that here. He's 26.2 points per 40 minutes. and Keve Aluma's second at 21.5, 5 points behind him. And then like the next is 18.8, 17.8. So he's pretty far ahead as far as point production. And the other thing we were talking about was there was only one guy on the team so far who is shooting over 40% from 3-point range, and I just gave it away. It's Hunter Couture, who's actually up there getting close to 50%. Cone is just a shade under 40%, but he takes a lot more difficult shots in general, and Hunter's productivity as a scorer is starting to drop because he's spending a lot of time at point, and that's taken away from just.
He did score 15 last night.
Yeah,
and he only had 3 at halftime, so he had a big second half.
That's right.
That guy, man. Every game I've got the tweet queued up. Hunter Couture draws the charge, and he does not disappoint.
He does. It took him a while last night. It was only about 4 minutes left.
There was not a whole lot of time left.
I saw it, and I immediately thought of Will Stewart, because nobody gets more excited about Hunter Couture charge than Will Stewart.
I'm just trolling for likes when I tweet that.
I love the second one. It wasn't a charge. It was technically a moving screen. But the guy just passes the ball and then just runs right into Couture, right? And then, which is an offensive foul because it's a moving screen because the guy's moving.
Right.
But they collided, and Hunter Couture stayed up, and the other guy, bam, is falls straight down. So Couture got the better of that one. And the other guy, and the Notre Dame guy, got called for the foul.
Nice.
So on Thursday, we'll talk about it a little bit later, Virginia Tech women's basketball played Louisville, and I called that game for 3304 Sports. And I'm sitting in Castle long after the game, working on what we need to get done for the highlights and the full game broadcast. And Jaylen Cone, this is about an hour after the game, just walks into Castle, has somebody rebounding for him. He's just by himself on the floor. It was me, Mark Berman, only ones left in Castle, just working on our stuff post-game. And I'm not kidding you guys. I mean, he's taking shots from 2 feet from the half-court line and just burying them. I mean, it's ridiculous, the range that he has on him. I mean,
he is such a pure shooter. Del Curry was a great shooter, but he's not what I would call a pure shooter. Jaylen Cone is square up to the basket, elevate, release at the top of the jump. He snaps the net. It's just man, I love watching, and I love that he's only a sophomore, and you got a couple more years of this.
3 more probably.
We hope. How many degrees are you gonna get?
Is there any shot you're uncomfortable with Jaylen Cone taking?
Maybe if he was going down the lane against a 7-footer.
I was going to say driving all the way to the basket because his mid-range game is as good as his long-range game.
Yeah, the thing is about his mid-range game, you would think he'd get a decent number of those shots blocked, but he elevates so high and so quickly. He gets on you as a defender, and you think you're going to have a chance to block it, but you don't realize until you see it how quickly he elevates, how explosive he is.
He's listed at 5'10", and he just – when he shoots, he's not playing 5'10".
Yeah, he's more like he's 6'2" or something.
He can be a problem on the defensive end, and there's one play last night that really stood out to me where he was in the game, and Virginia Tech was doing a lot of switching on defense, particularly in the second half, and he switched, and I think it was Leshevsky had him down inside, and that's I can't remember how tall Leshevsky is, but you're talking that's like 10 inches.
Yes,
and Notre Dame, which is, I've said this many times on the podcast, they are just one of the smartest, best coached teams in college basketball. And the point guard, what's his name? Hubbs?
Yeah,
Hubbs.
Prentice Hubbs.
Turned the ball over 4
just
times.
Kept dribbling around and took a shot or whatever. And the color analyst is going, you got the mismatch. Throw him the ball. And Hubbs did not.
They had another one in the second half with Beatty, with Leshevsky matched up on Beatty. And they had a chance to throw him the ball, and they'd got that matchup on a switch.
Yeah.
Now they, instead of really dialing in and getting it down in there, they just kept running their offense until eventually Tech switched again and got Aluma back.
Got the matchups
right. So Notre Dame is a really well coached basketball team. They're just not as good. They don't have the talent. They certainly don't have the talent they used to have.
Yeah,
they're now 0-4 in league play.
Yeah,
and 26 losses in a row to ranked teams now. That includes everybody from 1 to 25.
They're a shadow of their former selves from a talent standpoint. Yeah. I mean, look, they're not going to go winless because it's 20 ACC games, and
they're a good shooting team. Not in the second half.
I think they have 3 good players. Leshevsky's a good player.
23.
Who's their center? What's his name?
Zona.
No.
Cormac.
No.
Juwan Durham.
Durham. And then the number 23. What's his name?
Dane Goodwin.
Yeah,
Goodwin,
he was Mr. Basketball from the state.
He had 12 off the bench yesterday.
Right. He's a good player.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody else on that team is any good.
Let me bring up this stat real quick because Damian Salas texts in about Virginia Tech and their turnovers per game. Interesting stat. Hokies at 12.09 turnovers per game, third in the ACC behind UVA, 8.33 turnovers a game, and Notre Dame, 11.10 turnovers per game.
Right. Interesting. We'll have to dig into the numbers and see turnover percentage because I know Tech's pace is very, very low. Like there are fewer possessions in a Tech game. So what's the turnover rate? Like percentage of your possessions and things like that. That's probably. I'm still waiting for these broadcasts, and I'm not sure what's taking ESPN so long is to start using advanced stats on their broadcast.
Yeah.
So I should have done what I did earlier and say turnovers per game because it can be a misleading stat because of pace. Like some teams have more possessions than others because of their pace of play. So the stat that we should really be using is turnover percentage and see where Virginia Tech ranks there.
It was a big offensive second half for Virginia Tech. There are a lot of Justin Mutts had a terrific game. We'll talk about him in just a moment.
Yeah,
but
42 points in the second half.
I'm curious, Will, what stood out to you more in Sunday's win over Notre Dame? Was it the offense and everybody contributing, or was it the fact that Virginia Tech held Notre Dame to just 2 made field goals in the second half? Fighting Irish shot 10% from the field in the second half. Was Sunday's win more about the offense or the defense?
I thought it was all about the defense. I thought that was what was wrong in the first half. Tech had 35 points in the first half, and yet they were down at halftime. And Notre Dame was shooting, I think, 57% at the half. And I said, I don't remember if it was on the boards or on Twitter. I think it was Twitter. I said the thing that was worrying me is that, this is a Notre Dame team that was 3-6, 0-3 in the league. Had lost 25 games in a row at that point to ranked teams. And I was worried that they looked really confident. They were moving the ball well. They were getting open shots. They were snapping the net. And I thought, oh, man, this Notre Dame team looks really confident and in rhythm.
They looked like Notre Dame for the first time in about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
really.
And so I was worried about that continuing. And Tech started the second half with Beatty in the game. I think he played the first 4 minutes, and then they did the Cone Couture entry of those guys into the game. And Notre Dame did not score a field goal for at least the first 6 minutes of the second half. And I thought that was the key to the game. Virginia Tech kept doing their thing offensively. I thought they got much better defensively in the second half, but the big thing that happened was even when Notre Dame started getting open shots, they were missing them in the second half. They lost their confidence. Yeah. So to me, the story of the game was the defense.
Virginia Tech improves to 11-2 under Mike Young in the last 2 years when 4 players scored 10 points or more in a game. They did it against Louisville on Wednesday, and that was the second loss. And then they did it on Sunday against Notre Dame. The following players were in double figures. Keve Aluma, double-double, 15 points and 12 rebounds. Justin Mutts, 14.7 rebounds. 18 for Jaylen Cone, as we mentioned, and 15 for Hunter Couture. Tyrese Radford, 9 points, 8 rebounds. Chris, let's talk about Justin Mutts for a second.
So let me throw one thing in there. You may have seen this on Twitter. The 2 field goals by Notre Dame in the second half, I think that's a Tech record in ACC play defensively.
So you're telling me that NC State that year made more than 2 field goals in one half?
They had 3.
And they scored 24 points the whole game?
They had 24 points. One of the halves, they had 10 points, and that included 3 field goals. It's pretty remarkable.
35 minutes for Justin Mutts on Sunday. That was a team high. Chris, does he get better as every game? Do you feel like more confidence with him?
I think as he figures out who he is. He obviously is a better 3-point shooter than he was the first 2 years of his career at High Point and Delaware. I think he was 2 of 19 in those 2 years. So he is a little bit of a threat now.
He's 8 of 26 for 31%.
Right, but that's not who he is as a player. And, I especially feel like the Louisville game when he hit those 2 early, he kind of fell in love with it.
Fool's
to a certain
gold.
extent. Yeah, exactly. Fact of the matter is, he's a post player. He's a power forward, and the vast majority of his points need to be on the inside and off offensive rebounds and things like that. And I think he stayed true to himself more so last night. And if he does that, and if he does that going forward, then I think Tech will be just fine. I think Aluma only took 1 3-pointer.
Do you think that Mutts is the guy with, maybe not the guy, but maybe he's the guy with the most inside out potential, meaning he can, he's only a 31% shooter from 3-point range. What I mean by that is he's a guy that can go from the 3-point line to the basket and finish. Do you think that's an accurate?
Do you mean by dribbling from
driving,
driving?
drive? I'm not saying he's a point guard. He's not going to go to the rack like Justin Robinson. But if you give him a little room and he gets moving, you're in trouble.
I would say, are we just talking bigs, or are we talking?
I think we're talking bigs.
Okay. I would say, I don't know. I think Aluma's got a pretty good handle on him. I mean, you saw him drive.
That was a nice dunk last night. If you leave him room, he'll make it.
He's actually done a pretty good job in the open court in transition, better than you would think a big man. But generally speaking, I would say yes. I think when Gasson gets some size on him and adjusts to the speed of the game and everything like that, you're going to be impressed by him. He's got some physical tools that will become more pronounced once he figures out how to play at this level.
Yeah.
All right, one of my favorite things to do at the midway points of football. We've done it for football. We're going to do it for men's basketball. Now, we're not quite at the midway, but I think we're 4 games into ACC play, non-conference included. It's time to bring back Rose, Bud, and Thorn for Will and Chris regarding men's basketball. For those that don't remember what this is, I'm going to ask 3 things. The Thorn is the part that is not good for Virginia Tech. The Bud is what is blossoming into something that can be great. And then the Rose is something that is already really good. This is about the team in general. You can throw individual players in there as well. Let's start with the Thorn. 3-1 in league play, 9-2 overall. What is the Thorn right now for Virginia Tech men's basketball?
I am concerned. I think I was really concerned earlier in the season, and maybe I don't feel this way as much after the Louisville and Notre Dame games, but I'm concerned about performance against the zone and the ability to get the ball into the paint and back out, or into the paint and finish at the rim. I still don't know that Tech has that dribble drive guy. Nobody expects Justin Robinson to be on this team, but that's a valuable tool in the toolbox where when the shot clock runs down, a guy who can create his own shot. I think that's
supposed to be Jada.
Yeah. Yep, that is correct. We knew that going in that, now they got a guy that can go to the rim.
Now, I will say that his absence, it hurts Virginia Tech from that standpoint. But in my opinion, the offense itself, I don't think was running particularly well whenever he was in the game. I think it runs better with Hunter Couture in the game than Jada running the point.
Yes, I agree.
So you kind of get to the point where, okay, his absence cost us a little bit here, but I think we gained some stuff too.
Right.
So I'm not altogether displeased with. I mean, there can be such a thing as having too many players and having to keep too many guys happy.
I agree, and the great thing about having a deep roster is Johnny Ojiako is not coming back as fast as they thought he would. Cordell Pemsel apparently has an issue with back spasms or something like that, and they're not missing those guys. And that's great.
Well, they can go small and put Mutts in there and go with a 4-guard lineup, which these days to these players is no big deal.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be. That's normal basketball these days.
So anyway, do you agree that the ability to just break down a defense in the half court?
Yeah, I would say that. Right, there's no Justin Robinson, like you said. Now, granted, Justin Robinson is the best ever in Tech history as far as that goes, probably. I would say, as far as penetration, but yeah, there's Aline does it sometimes. Aline's inconsistent. Mm-hmm. Aline scored 0 points last night
and 4 fouls.
And
had 15 against Louisville.
Well, and like all in the second half, dude. There was a stretch in the Louisville game where he just dominated him. And
he was being very aggressive.
Right. And Mike Young said after the game, he said, "I got on him at halftime because I just didn't think he was good enough in the first half." So we're dealing with his inconsistencies. That might honestly, he is a guy who can beat people off the dribble and things like that. Certainly not to the extent of Justin Robinson, but so yeah, I would agree with that. I think if we could get Aline playing consistently, I think that this team they could potentially really take a step up. But then again, if you get him playing consistently, you've got Jaylen Cone scoring 20 every night. It seems like who are you going to take off the court, right?
Yeah. So to flesh that out a little bit, it's not just playing against the zone in the half court isn't just a case of having a guy who can break it down by himself. I also think that over the course of the next couple of years, you're going to see the ball movement improve in the half court offense, and they're going to, just by moving the ball, they're going to create open shots. But I still think the key is that guy in the paint. And you watch Buzz coach this against. Buzz was really good about coaching this against Syracuse, and he had somebody whose name I
Chris
can't.
Clark.
Justin
Bibbs.
Justin Bibbs. He would put in the middle of that zone. You got to have that guy that can.
I always thought to put Chris Clark there, and Bibbs.
Chris
was
Clark,
a shooter.
yeah. If he had Chris Clark,
right?
Yeah.
So the Thorn diagnosing a defense in the half court. How about a Bud, Chris Coleman? What is something that is blossoming, not quite great, but it's on its way of being there, could be promising by the end? Could be a player, could be something about the team.
I would say Couture at point guard. I think he didn't have any assists last night, but in a way, the offense itself is the point guard, but you still, who you have playing there, I think he just provides more of a scoring threat than Beatty. Now Beatty, obviously, when Tech needed to get off to a great defensive start in the second half, Beatty was there. When Tech needed a stop late against Louisville, Beatty was there with the strip in the lane. So Virginia Tech is getting a lot out of both guys now, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think the offense really comes to life more offensively with Couture in there. Now, he's not as good an on-ball defender as Beatty, but you could argue that he's a better off-the-ball defender than Beatty.
Yes.
Right. And
Couture proves that time and again, getting his hands in the passing lanes, getting defensive position.
Right.
You're right. You're right. On the ball, maybe not, but off the ball, that's called a team defender. I think he's becoming an excellent team defender.
Right. And you're not going to be able to compare their numbers directly because Couture did play a little bit off the ball last night with Beatty at point guard, but generally speaking, Couture's at point guard these days. And I don't know. We'll see what happens. I feel better about, honestly, the offense running with Couture at point guard than I did with Jada at point guard, as far as the just running the offense itself. So we'll see. I would prefer to play him off the ball, but at the same time, if you give him all his minutes off the ball, you're taking off Jaylen Cone or you're taking off Naheem Aline, who I know he's playing inconsistent right now, but there's going to be some nights where he scores 20. So it's something to at least watch is what happens there. But I like what I've seen so far.
And I'll leave the rose for Will Stewart.
My man, Hunter Couture. Chris was very specific about Hunter at point guard being the Bud. The rose is actually tough for me because I'm torn between Cone and Couture. I think as far as being most consistent, you got to go with the Luma.
Sure.
But I'm developing a huge man crush on Hunter Couture. Everything he does in terms of making shots and running the offense and playing defense and drawing the charges. And, he missed that final shot against Louisville. He will make at least one game winner in his career. That's going to happen. So it's close, but I will pick him over Cone. And I got almost a big man crush on Cone. I love watching that guy shoot. He made a shot, I think it was against Louisville, where he was literally spinning in the air when he released it. Yeah. He was running along the baseline and coming off a screen, and he catches and spins and shoots and boom,
And that unfortunately is why he's not going to break Virginia Tech's 3-point percentage record for his career because he takes so many tough ones.
The degree of difficulty.
Ty Outlaw owns that record, right?
Yeah.
And you have to average 2 makes per game to qualify for your career. Outlaw averaged exactly 2 makes per game, right? But Outlaw's, all of his shots were he's squared up to the basket
Set
already.
shotting it
right.
almost.
Jaylen Cone is coming off screens and, like you said, just contorting his body in weird ways in the air. So he's going to make amazing shots, but his percentage is at 39.7%. You know, he's never going to be a 47% shooter like Outlaw because of the types of shots he takes. Now, the record that will be in jeopardy is Vasayo's overall number of made 3-pointers.
So Vasayo's the record holder for that,
yes,
huh?
I believe I put that in inside
no
the
foul?
number. Yeah, 80 not foul. Put that in inside the numbers for basketball last week. I don't know if it was officially an inside the numbers article or not. I don't think it was, but anyway.
I really wish Vasayo just made that one shot against Clemson that one year. I think Tech would have won the ACC regular season. Am I? Does that ring a bell?
Oh, I don't know if he had a shot in that game.
I remember a Clemson game in Castle where he had a last-second shot and it didn't fall.
I don't know if that was that. No, the Clemson game that year was just we had so many turnovers. Like Xavier Dowdell had 7 turnovers in like the first half.
Right, I'm mixing my years up. I'm remembering a Malcolm Delaney year. So anyway, not to sidetrack the conversation. Cone, I believe, shot 43% last year, which he didn't. If I'm remembering things correctly, he did not have enough makes or attempts to qualify for NCAA statistics. But if he had, he'd have been, I think, top 10 in the country.
Yeah. No, he's got to be careful that he doesn't fall in. Yes, he needs to fall in love with it, but not too deeply in love with it. He did have one bad shot last night.
Yes.
And it didn't even draw iron. And you could tell that he had been making so many recently that he was just going to keep shooting.
Yeah, the heat check.
And he dialed him back after that. Yep. I think Mike Young dialed him back a little bit after that. But that's up to Mike Young to manage.
So one thing that worries me that I wanted to ask about is Kevin Aluma, to me, seems to be struggling with the post-up game in the half court. When you dump it into him and he's backing his guy down, I don't think he's scoring with regularity like he was earlier in the season.
I just think probably the film is out to a certain extent on his strengths and weaknesses. I mean, look, Mike Bray's a really, really good coach. Mike Bray had 10 games of film to study. Jay Wright had 2 games of film to study, and that was against Bradford and another low.
And Leshevsky's one of the more underrated bigs in the ACC, I'd say.
Yeah.
He was definitely stonewalling Aluma a lot last night.
The big thing to me is, like, Aluma's just I think when we've gotten in trouble I think when we got in trouble against Louisville was when we kept trying to force feed it to Aluma. Yeah. I know some people say there were times earlier where people said they need to go to Aluma more. We're getting away from that. It needs to come within the flow of the offense, though. You can't just sit there and try to force feed him just for the sake of doing it. Like, it's got to come within the flow of the offense, or it's not going to work. So, I was actually happy with it last night. I didn't think Tech was overly aggressive trying to get him the ball. I think the game came to him. I don't think he forced anything. I don't think they forced anything into him. I think sometimes it's all about timing and angle of the pass, and sometimes, like, that is a little bit off right now. And that's still just so many guys new to running the offense and playing together and things like that. But I think that's something that'll get better with time.
All right, we're a fifth of the way through conference play. 3-1, Hokies are in ACC play. Quickly, Will, and then to Chris. Who's the most important player to the success of this Virginia Tech team on roster right now?
Man, I don't think I can pick one guy. I like the way they all work together. I think at this point, Couture is what he is. Cone is what he is. Radford has been kind of quiet last couple games. He needs to continue to be that aggressive guy. I'm struggling between picking him or Aluma. Aluma getting back his production in the half court post game, or learning how to kick it back out to open shooters. He's got 15 assists for the year, and I'm looking at the stat sheet. And by the way, who is number 2 on the team behind Beatty in assists?
Radford and Mutts.
Oh, I was going to say, don't look. You have to guess.
I didn't know you were asking us.
Radford, which is interesting. Justin Mutts with 22.
He had a nice pass to Gasson.
Oh, yeah, that was really nice. So to me, continued productivity from Aluma, maybe increased productivity, and Radford being the Radford we all know and love, the rebounder, the junkyard dog. I think that's just critical because I think the other guys are going to continue to do what they do. You could also, I'll let Chris go from here. I could throw another guy in, but I'll see what he says.
Most important player, Chris.
I would say Aluma. I mean, if Tech lost Aluma tomorrow, then who else they have on the roster over, that tall who's going to score and be a post present? Mutts, yes, it's 6'7". He could do it to a certain extent as an undersized center, but ideally he continues to play the 4 and not the 5. Ojiako is banged up and just coming back and rusty and didn't get a preseason. Don't expect anything from that guy this year. It's unfair to him. And now Pimsel apparently has back spasms, and he's not a big scorer anyway. So Aluma's the only big that can be a consistent scorer for Virginia Tech. Meanwhile, I think everybody else, it's like if Jaylen Cone has an off night, okay, that's fine because Aline's capable of going for 20 or even Couture, and vice versa. Aline doesn't score last night, and Jaylen Cone puts up 18 or so. So I think there's some interchangeable parts in the backcourt. I don't think there's an interchangeable part for Aluma. And he's averaging 28.8 minutes per game, but I bet what does he average in the last 2 games? Probably 35, right?
Yeah.
So I think, to me, he's the one guy who is more irreplaceable than the others.
On Tuesday, 21st ranked Duke comes to Castle Coliseum. Blue Devils are 5-2 on the year. They're undefeated in league play, 3-0 in the ACC. Matthew Hurt averaging nearly 20 points per game. That's their top scorer. Matthew Hurt.
Who?
Oh.
I was just watching people talk on the boards, and they're like, I literally can't name one Duke player.
It's like that every year.
Well, you could name Zion, though.
Yeah.
It's a fair point.
You couldn't help it. ESPN
wouldn't let you.
they've got Henry Coleman.
From Richmond.
Okay.
Yep.
That's Hank Coleman's son, who started
Trinity Episcopal. Yep.
Yeah.
So Virginia Tech's had a lot of success against Duke inside of Castle Coliseum in the last 5 years. You think about
it really fascinates me that Notre Dame has lost 26 straight games to ranked teams because they're so well coached. And then you look at Virginia Tech, and like you said, they've had a lot of success against teams like Duke. A lot of ranked teams Tech has knocked off. So go ahead.
Tech has been well coached too, except now Tech is well coached, and they have better players than Notre Dame. Let's just face it, Notre Dame doesn't have much talent anymore.
Yeah.
That is Notre Dame the least talented team in the ACC.
I will keep an eye out for that.
You could argue them. You could
haven't seen Wake Forest yet.
Boston College. Boston College only lost to Duke by 1.
Wake Forest might be. But you're right. They're in the bottom tier.
Yes.
All right. Anyway,
Chris,
back to Duke.
How important of a test is this? How much are we going to learn about Virginia Tech and how good they are against a Duke team that is not as good as they have been in years past?
I honestly don't know how much we're going to learn because they didn't play for a month. Their first game back, they barely beat Boston College, who's like 3-8, right? But then they came out and looked better against Wake Forest this past weekend. But again, that's a Wake Forest team that they had a bunch of games canceled in December because all their opponents kept having coronavirus issues. And for all I know, they've got them now. I don't know. So Duke has not been challenged since after they took a month off from basketball. So I don't know if we're going to find. I'm not going to say Duke's not going to be a challenge, but I feel like it's a game that I think Tech will win because I just think Duke took so much time off and they got so many young players that I just think Tech is further along.
Well, Stuart,
isn't Coach K in and out as far as coaching goes?
He did not coach against Boston College.
He was in quarantine.
Interesting.
But I think he's
I believe he'll be. Yes, I believe he'll be coaching.
John Shire was their head coach.
That's right. Yep.
Well, Stuart, are you going to pick the Hokies against the Blue Devils? How do you feel?
I do not know. I will say once again, and I'll say this all season long, I really wish Tech was playing this game with next year's team. And I look around the entire ACC, and I mention this because I include Duke in this. I look around the entire ACC, and I just don't see programs that are all that good. And I think if Virginia Tech had next year's team or maybe even the year after, depending upon how things break, they'd have a good shot at at winning the whole thing. I'm not talking about the tournament. Anything can happen at tournament time. I'm talking about the regular season. And so I kind of lump Duke in there with that this year. I texted Chris. It's funny, I've lost track of who I was watching. I was watching North Carolina play someone. It may have been Louisville a few days ago. And what I saw was a lot of really talented players playing a lot of really bad basketball.
You've texted me that during several UNC games this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, Virginia Tech can beat anybody in the league.
I really do think at this point right now there is a chance Virginia Tech can win the regular season ACC title.
Now,
I don't think I'm crazy saying that.
Does that mean I think Tech is a great team? No. I just look around and I'm like, they can beat anybody in this
I think
league.
Florida State is a contender. I actually think Louisville, they're going to crack top 25. They have one loss on the year. They can do it. But, I mean, Chris, if Tech shoots the ball well and can have that interior presence in the front court, I mean, there's no reason to think that they can't at least contend for it.
Yeah. I see a lot of teams that are kind of, you lump into the same category and you say, if this goes right and that goes right, then they could do this. And Virginia Tech is one of those teams.
Yeah.
I would say they're upper tier, though, right now. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
I think Virginia Tech is a legit top 4 team in the ACC right now.
I think that's fair.
I don't know. Once Duke comes back and gets some games under their belt, we'll see. All right, so let's see. Who would your top 4 be right now, Evan?
Well, I think just in terms of talent, I'm not saying they're peaking at the right time. I think Florida State, in no particular order, by the way. Florida State.
Louisville.
I think Louisville. I think Virginia. I think again, talent-wise, I know they're not showing it right now.
They will gel.
Yeah, they missed a whole bunch of time, too.
And Kihei Clark is a problem. He's
he absolutely
good,
is.
yeah.
But Huff's been struggling, and then I think you put Tech in there. I mean, North Carolina hasn't showed that they're top 4 right now, and Duke, what they've put out right now, knock on wood, I don't think Duke has shown they're a top 4 team right now. Clemson, Tech's beating Clemson, so I don't know.
NC State was looking good until they lost to Miami.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, we're a fifth of the way through the ACC, so please don't pull the receipts on me in a month today. This is right now on Monday, January 11th. All right, we're 45 minutes into the podcast. We still have 3 more sports to talk about. We'll step aside for a break. When we come back, Hendon Hooker has announced that he is transferring to Rocky Top in Tennessee. We will talk about that. We'll talk about a couple of players that are sticking around, and Virginia Tech might have to face Coach Beamer in a couple of years. That's all coming up on episode 161 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Welcome back into episode 161 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, presented by Anytime Fitness, Campus Emporium, and the Southeast Regional Training Center. So great to have you with us as we record on Monday morning, January 11th. Evan Hughes alongside of Chris Coleman, Will Stewart behind the scenes, the birthday boy, Malcolm Stewart. Final thought on men's basketball, because we were just discussing during the break that the schedule looks favorable moving forward, Will.
Right, but what I specifically wanted to talk about was the TV broadcast schedule. So last night I was noticing during the game there just wasn't a lot of activity on our message boards. And I'm not sure why that was, because it was a tight game. You know, Tech wasn't playing well, then they were playing well. And the other thing I noted is that Duke game Tuesday night is at 7 p.m. on the ACC network. Now, when the schedule was first made up, that game was slotted as ESPN/2/U. It's Duke. How often is Duke not on one of the ESPN networks? And then when it finally gets settled, it's not even one of those. It's the ACC network. So here are Tech's next. Here's the rest of their schedule. I won't give the teams. I'll just give broadcast. ACC network, ACC network, ACC network, RSN, RSN, ACC network, RSN, RSN, ACC network.
And then we get ESPN on February 13th.
Against Louisville?
Correct.
Which supposedly, we'll see.
Killing is too strong a word, but the lack of ability to see this team is killing conversation and interest, I think.
Anybody who has Comcast can't watch this team play.
Right. And
this
you
is
can't watch them at Castle.
Right. Well, I mean, and here, you know, for the RSN games, I'll have to go to a bar and watch. Right.
Correct. That's always difficult to watch when it's RSN, because it's like NBC Sports Washington,
right,
Fox Sports South.
So I have no trouble seeing the team, and there's because I get it. I'm a Dish Network subscriber, so I get the ACC network. But there are a lot of Tech fans that are not seeing this basketball team. So
that's actually might do a poll this week. Like, how many of you have been unable to see this team play because you don't get the ACC network?
Usually playing Duke is a ticket to being able to see the team play, and that generates – Duke is Duke, so that generates a lot of message board activity, but also the fact that everybody can see it, and that's not going to be the case Tuesday.
You bring up the schedule, what network the games are going to be on. I want to just quickly look at the schedule ahead for men's basketball. So tomorrow on Tuesday, the 12th, Duke, and then Virginia Tech at Wake Forest, home against Boston College, at Syracuse, at Notre Dame. So, Chris, that's 4 games in a row there, especially after Duke. Those are winnable games for Virginia Tech.
Very winnable games. If Virginia Tech can knock off Duke on Tuesday, it is Tuesday.
It'll be 4-1.
It'll be 4-1, and then the next 2 games are Wake Forest and Boston College.
Boston College.
5-1, 6-1.
You
Here
got
we
a
go,
chance
counting wins.
I know. You got to get a chance to go to 6-1, and then Notre Dame.
Syracuse.
You got a chance to beat 7-1.
Yeah, we don't know how good Syracuse is.
They're off and on. They're really a hot and cold team.
Right, they very much are a hot and cold
and
team.
that game is at Syracuse?
That game, so it goes, again, at Wake, home against Boston College, at Syracuse, at Notre Dame.
Can you imagine playing on an empty Carrier Dome?
It's hard enough place to play because it's the sight lines are so different.
You're just playing in a big, cavernous, empty space with no fans there. And I mean, it's like that anyway. But even when you throw in the fact that there's no fans, that just must be a really, really odd feeling.
So there was some discussion back when Buzz Williams was the coach. There was some discussion of how many of the top coaches in the ACC were getting ready to retire out. Roy Williams, Coach K, Boeheim at Syracuse, and there was some conjecture: could Buzz Williams and Tony Bennett be the new long-term, highly successful coaches in the ACC? Anybody who was paying attention knew Buzz wasn't going to be here very long, but that was just a discussion. So you just wonder if the door's going to open a little bit, and I don't want to wear that topic out because I know we have to move on.
There's a lot of old coaches in this league.
Yeah.
Coach K, Roy Williams,
Jim
Boeheim, Larinaga.
Right.
Bray. Let's throw Mike Bray in there now. I'm not sure his age, but look, Notre Dame has dropped like a rock.
Leonard Hamilton.
Yeah, Leonard Hamilton is up
there. Of course, Leonard Hamilton is in his 70s, looks like he's in his 50s.
Yeah. So, there's a lot.
And then you've got some young coaches like Kevin Keats, Josh Pastner.
Pastner's not going to be at Georgia Tech very long because he's not any good, but,
Yeah, so, there's opportunity here.
No question. And there's opportunity when you enter the transfer portal in sports. And as we transition from men's basketball to football, we begin with transfer portal news. And that is former Hokie starting quarterback Hendon Hooker announced that he is transferring to Tennessee to play for old Rocky Top. He's going from the ACC to the SEC. Will, what were your thoughts when you heard the news?
I can't. You know how sometimes things go down and then they come right back out because you can't comprehend them. A lot of our fans are down in far Southwest Virginia, down in that area. And a lot of our fans are in Tennessee, so they're subjected to a lot of Tennessee volunteer news and opinion and fans and all that sort of thing. I'm not. So I'm not going to sit here and spout off all these Tennessee stats and the state of their program. But, that's just an interesting choice. I don't know anything about their quarterback.
I will say their quarterback, Guantanamo, who's this big 5-star recruit.
He was a starter as a 5-star true freshman this past year.
He's in the transfer portal. So I believe
he did?
He's in the portal.
When did he go in the portal?
Not 100% sure, but I did see that news on the ticker, I believe. So I believe Hendon Hooker is going to be a likely starter.
So that decision makes more sense now because, all right, so the Tennessee quarterback had not entered the portal when Hooker committed. He must have entered this past weekend.
By the way, the correct pronunciation. Yeah, he's transferring to Washington State. ESPN announced 2 days ago.
Okay.
And he was this big recruit, like you were saying. So he's at Washington State. So that leaves.
And he's transferring out after his true freshman year.
No, he was there for 2 years.
2 years.
He was a starter for 2 years.
Was he?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yep. He was the starter for 2 years, and he's transferring out.
Correct.
Wow. Who knows, man? There's all kinds of reasons why guys are entering the portal.
He started 7 games in 2020 and 32 in his career. Lost the starting job late in the season to Harrison Bailey.
Oh, wait. Bailey might be the true freshman. Look up Harrison Bailey 247.
Sure. Well,
yeah, right. I will say this, and I know Chris will agree. Hendon, if you're going to play in the SEC, you better hit the weight room, buddy, because it's going to be rough.
Yeah.
Harrison Bailey was a 4-star quarterback. As I pull up his profile, Bailey for the University of Tennessee. As
What class was he?
the page loads, play the Jeopardy music. Thank you. Finally loading.
R.I.P.
He
Alex
is a freshman.
Okay. So, and what overall? People were describing him as a 5-star to me. Not
He was rated as a 4-star prospect and the nation's 3rd-ranked pro-style quarterback in the 247 composite
So he's a
rankings.
borderline 5-star.
So highly rated guy,
What's his overall ranking?
Overall, number 7 national ranking by Max Preps in 2019. Nike Elite 11 finalist. I'm going through his bio.
You need to go to his 247 profile.
I need to go to his 247 profile.
Yes, you did.
There we go.
There we are.
Harrison Bailey. So anyways, we're talking about Hendon Hooker announcing that he's transferring to Tennessee. As Chris knows how to use the 247 site way more than I do.
So a little bit of dead air while Chris looks.
Oh,
Why is that not working?
sorry. MacBooks, you know.
I don't know how to use a Mac.
But at any rate, 6'5", 225 pro-style quarterback Bailey, compared to Hooker, who's transferring in.
He's a top 100 recruit as a true freshman.
Top 100 recruit.
Top 100 recruit as a true freshman, and he ended up starting in the second half of the season this past year, and that's where that's what Hendon Hooker's walking into.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Well,
no, the guy didn't play great, but he is talented.
It gives me a reason to watch Tennessee. I'll put it that way. I'll be intrigued.
I'll be intrigued to see.
Especially
what he
considering how
does.
Tennessee's kind of been on the downslope.
So you're
Jeremy
used to,
Pruitt,
for them.
you know.
So the most part, you're used to Virginia Tech football players transferring out and disappearing off the end of the earth. You know, Tennessee's not the end of the earth. That's an actual legit football program.
Right.
You know, like Damon Hazleton going to Missouri. He played for Missouri.
Right.
SEC school, decent team.
Yeah. I think he got like 35 passes or something like that. So it's not like he got a ton of balls out there.
So from that standpoint, this is different. He's not. You know, very many of Tech's transfers in the last couple of years didn't get picked up at all.
The Nestor one is the one that's going to bother me.
Right.
Robert's chiming in, by the way, that the quarterback's coach is Chris Winkie, and the offensive coordinator is T. Martin at Tennessee.
That is very interesting.
But how about some good news of players that are staying in Blacksburg? Last podcast, we talked a bunch about players in the portal and those that are staying, those are declaring for the NFL draft. These are 2 new players that have announced they're staying. Offensive lineman Lasita Smith is returning, as well as defensive lineman Deshaun Crawford.
Yeah, we figured Crawford was going to return because he did not participate in the senior
He didn't
day.
go through senior day.
Yeah.
And a guy like him, you know, when he got hurt in the preseason and stayed injured all year and never really got over it, he doesn't want to go out like that.
Yeah.
And thankfully, because of the rules this year, he doesn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very
And that's important, especially important because Hewitt's not coming back.
I was about to say, does he kind of slide into that starting spot where Hewitt was?
I mean, well, last year the starters were Hewitt and Crawford. So next year I would assume it'll be Crawford and Pollard.
Pollard, right.
And then real quick, this was This was put on Twitter yesterday, and it was in our comment section on YouTube Live from Evan G. Watkins. It sounds like Virginia Tech is the leader for a transfer target from Clemson, a defensive tackle. I don't know if you guys got the chance to see that.
Jordan
Williams was like the first what I'll call modern recruit that just retweeted every single thing anybody said about him on Twitter.
I remember that.
Really,
Okay.
really nice kid. Because I interviewed him one time. He would love to talk about recruiting.
So I forgot about that. Yeah,
I liked. He's a really nice kid. He also is the first. I think he's the first recruit that made me ever dislike recruiting, the modern recruiting game, because of everything that got retweeted on Twitter. Like anybody said anything. I mean, we've got to follow.
So you wanted to follow him, right?
Right, I did follow him, and then literally anything any fan or anybody said about him, he would retweet. And I remember when he finally committed to Clemson, I was glad that he had committed so I could unfollow him.
Yes.
No, and again, I want to state he's a really, really nice kid, and did an interview with me and is a nice guy, and I hope Virginia Tech ends up getting him. But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what is wrong with this guy? And now it's like everybody's like that. Right?
Yeah, and so God bless those people that actually follow recruits on Twitter and actually comb through their tweets.
Oh my gosh!
Wow, it can be a real mess.
Yeah.
So here's the list of Virginia Tech coaches that are following Pearson Prelo, Mark Dythorn, Brad Cornelson, Bo Davidson, Adam Lechtenberg, Matt Transu, Ryan Smith. You get the idea.
Oh yeah.
So, there's some
I'm
heat
not
there.
surprised they're putting the full court press on. Now this is a 6'4", 300-pounder. He was a defensive end in high school.
He's from Virginia Beach.
Yep, I'll forget which Virginia Beach high school he went to.
Pulling up his profile right now. He's a redshirt junior, and he went to Frank W. Cox High School.
That's right. He went to Cox. That's right. Tavion Robinson's high school.
Right. That's one of the connections.
I think he's got about 10 or 12 tackles for loss in his career. Didn't play as much this year as he did last year, but yes, he's a guy who would step right in and help right away.
Yeah.
Probably start right away.
Interesting.
Made his first career start this year at Wake Forest. Had a stop in the ACC championship game against Notre Dame, and then Sugar Bowl against Ohio State. So, anyways, that was reported, and again, you lose Gerard Hewitt. You bring back
So
Deshaun
did you say
Crawford,
that Williams is a redshirt junior?
redshirt junior?
So he's got 2 more years.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 6'4", 310-pound defensive tackle.
Sold.
Clemson. So
I'll take him.
Anyways, that's the majority of the football news about the roster. I believe we have talked about every.
Oh, you got to talk about the
Yep, everyone who's in the transfer portal, everyone who's declared from the NFL draft, everyone who's returning. We have discussed it over the last 2 podcasts. Last little bit about football is that Virginia Tech might have to face Coach Beamer in a game in 2025. It was announced last week that the Chick-fil-A kickoff game in 2025 will feature South Carolina and head coach Shane Beamer and Virginia Tech. Now, that is 4 years away, but Chris, when you saw the news, what'd you think?
I've always envisioned a Virginia Tech-South Carolina matchup in Charlotte. So I'm a little bit surprised that this is in Atlanta and not Charlotte. Charlotte would make more sense.
South Carolina kept playing UNC in Charlotte.
Right.
It's
right.
like, why not us?
Yeah, not us. I think that would be better. Okay, that's fine. I'll take Atlanta. That's fine. It'll be early enough in the season. I can go down. The Braves, if they're home that weekend, I can go to Braves games. That'll work out fine. Yeah. Now that being said, first of all, we don't know if Shane's still going to be their coach then.
And I have something to say about that, but go ahead.
I mean, who knows? We're talking 5 years from now.
4.
So 4, yeah. But I think I'm sure he probably will be. He probably will, the chances are, I know you've got your stat.
So let me jump in
Go ahead
here.
and get your stat.
I did the research, and so if you're out there on the outside and you're looking in and you're like, oh, SEC school, man, there's no guarantee he's going to be there. That would be his 5th season. 21, 22, 23, 24 would be his first 4 years. 2025 would be his 5th year. So I looked it up, and South Carolina doesn't behave like a typical SEC school when it comes to churning through coaches in the past. Since 1946, every coach they have had has made it to at least the first game of his 5th year.
Muschamp was there for elite. Wow, I felt like he was there shorter.
I know. Tell you what, double check it. Double check Muschamp.
Muschamp was hired the same year Fuente was hired.
All right.
That's good.
So,
wow, that was a quick.
So, except for one guy, they had a guy in the 70s coach for 1 year. Who knows what was going on there? I didn't drill down and do the research on that. But so for the last, that is 70 plus years, their coaches have made it to the first game of their 5th year.
All right. So there you have it. It's very, very likely.
Very likely that
Tech
Shane will be
Shane
coaching
Beamer.
that team. And also, one of the things about Shane is that, from what I understand, again, I don't follow other schools all that closely, but from what I understand, the school president, Bob Caslin, was involved in getting rid of Muschamp. I don't know how involved he was in hiring Shane Beamer, but and I also don't know what their athletic director situation is.
Ray Tanner.
I don't know how long Ray. Is Ray still going to be there in 2025? I think Caslin will still be the school president because he's only been president for a couple of years. So the structure above Shane will probably be the same, which makes it more likely that he'll still be there.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Now, on a personal note, I got a son who's a sophomore at South Carolina, and I got 2 kids at Virginia Tech, and I went to Virginia Tech. My wife went to Penn State. I think we're going to have her root for South Carolina. So
you're going to even it
balance
out.
it out. So here's the only question I have for fun, real quick. Will Coach Frank Beamer be wearing maroon and orange, or will he be wearing South Carolina
Now, see,
colors?
that's the first thing I thought about.
Frank will no longer be getting paid by Virginia Tech, I think, or that'll be his last year.
Yeah.
I think it was 10 years. Or was it 8 years? Oh, it's 8 years. Okay.
So he'll
Wait, elaborate on that. I didn't realize that.
He was still on the payroll as like an ambassador, goodwill ambassador.
Yeah, like when Frank
fundraiser.
retired, he signed an 8-year, $250,000 a year contract to sit around and be Frank Beamer.
Yeah.
He was at the basketball game on Sunday.
It's good work if you can get it. Yeah.
Can we get a Chris Coleman ambassador role? Anyone want to sign up for that?
Chris is still a young man.
It's
a possibility.
I've always wanted to play South Carolina. I'm divided.
I know.
I don't like any situation, though, where it's Virginia Tech versus a Beamer. I don't like any – honestly. Oh, ESPN's going to be all over it, but like
there's no doubt about that.
I don't think it's going to – I think it might be fun to talk about going into, but I don't think it's going to be a lot of fun during and afterwards.
Okay. There's a lot of ground to cover between now.
There's
and
a lot
then.
of ground to cover. But I don't know what's going to happen in the game yet, obviously, so it's hard to say. But I don't like putting Frank Beamer in an awkward situation. I certainly know that.
Yeah.
I mean, his alma mater, the school he coached, he's the Virginia Tech Hall of Famer versus his own son. Who do you pull for?
I think about when Del Curry, when Seth Curry played for Duke and played at Castle Coliseum, Del Curry had a black jacket on and did not wear any Duke colors and did not wear any Virginia Tech colors.
Yeah.
So here's a question from Andrew Ross real quick. You'll appreciate this. In 5 years, who do you think will be in a better position, South Carolina or Virginia Tech?
I
define better position.
Define better. Honestly, I don't think South Carolina's like the 4th best job in their own division. I think Virginia Tech has more potential as an ACC Coastal Division team than South Carolina has as an SEC East team. And I think South Carolina's got really good facilities. They're in a really good recruiting location, yada, yada, yada.
Good fan base.
Right. And I think South Carolina, if it wasn't for a money thing, they should just leave the SEC and join the ACC and get in the Coastal. And they would have just as much potential. They'd have more potential if they were in the Coastal Division than they would in the SEC East because they got to go through Florida and Georgia, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's why you have to define better position. Because if the question is 5 years from now, if you've lifted South Carolina from the SEC and put them in the ACC, who would be more competitive, them or Virginia Tech?
Right.
Probably South Carolina. Probably.
But that doesn't mean they won't go. They're going to be like 7-5 overall and 3-5 in the SEC, right? Because they lost to Florida and Georgia, and maybe their 2 crossover opponents were Bama and LSU.
So I'll answer the question this way. I think at best this will be a competitive game. At worst, South Carolina could possibly blow Virginia Tech out, depending upon what happens between now and then. I do not see a future scenario where Virginia Tech will be in a position to blow out South Carolina 5 years from now, unless Shane turns out to be an absolute disaster.
We are an hour and 8 minutes into the podcast. Great discussion about Hokies men's basketball, Virginia Tech football, future opponents, the roster. We're going to talk about wrestling and women's basketball briefly, but we've got a lot of people chiming in the chat right now. Keep those questions coming. Drop them in the chat. We'll get to them here in less than 10 minutes. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. We're at 14 likes right now. Try and get us to 20. Hit that thumbs up button. Help us out and give us a couple of likes. Great discussion there about that game. I'm already looking forward to that 2025 Chick-fil-A kickoff. South Carolina and Virginia Tech.
Oh, by the way, so the teams have played. I think Tech is, I can't remember the record, but they played 6 times in a row from like 1985 or 86 through 1991, and Tech went 0-4-2 in those last 6.
2 ties out of 6 games.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
And they used to play each other every year, and then Tech went to the Big East, South Carolina went to the SEC, and that was the end.
I think one of those South Carolina games might have been the first game I ever came to. The first game I ever remember coming to was the '93 Maryland game. but I know I came to one either a year or two before that.
Yeah,
I thought it was South Carolina, but I could be wrong.
First Tech game I remember was 07 ECU.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Heavy duty. All right,
All right, let's transition. Let's talk about the 8th ranked Virginia Tech wrestling program. 8th in the country. A quad meet on Sunday for the Hokies, and they won all 3. They beat Ohio 39-6. They beat Kent State 32-9. And then the marquee matchup, they beat West Virginia 24-10. Chris, I don't think it matters in any sport. When Tech beats West Virginia, you're a happy man. It's thumbs up from Chris Coleman. A couple of notes. Sam Latona, 3-0 on the day, including a 3-2 decision.
he was the only Tech wrestler to go 3-0 on the day.
Correct. 3-2 decision over the 12th ranked wrestler in one of those 3 wins.
Yeah.
Which was a big time decision for Latona, who's ranked 20th in the country. Sam Hilligus recorded another pin. Of course, he started off his college career with a pin against Campbell. Bryce Andonian, as well as Colin Girardi, who got a start at 141 in one of the matches, all won by pin. And then 2 bonus point wins for second-ranked Hunter Bolin. I thought that was one of the takeaways, Will, was that Bolin, after a disappointing win in the season opener against Campbell, I thought really bounced back yesterday.
Yes. So I wondered, how do you do a quad meet when you go in? And basically, Virginia Tech had 3 full dual meets against all 3 teams, right? So didn't they wrestle? Who'd they wrestle first?
Ohio.
And they went through all weight classes.
Correct.
Virginia Tech versus Ohio. Then they wrestled Kent State and went through all the weight classes. Then they wrestled WVU and went through all the weight classes. So it's a long day.
Yep.
And when we say that Latona, was it Latona that went 3-0?
One of them was a forfeit, but yes, he did go 3-0.
It's not like the other guys lost. It's that I don't think Tech had any wrestlers wrestle all 3.
You got to use some depth.
Yeah. I was about to say, correct. It was not the same starting lineup.
So like Mekhi Lewis wrestled twice, Bolin wrestled twice.
Unless you get a pin in the first round. I mean, can you imagine like going 3 wrestling matches, all 3 in one day? Oh gosh.
Yeah. We saw a lot of young freshmen who might not be in the real starting lineup get some solid action.
Yeah,
yesterday.
so I think your average person doesn't know that you have 10 weight classes, but aren't there like 25 or 30 wrestlers on the team?
Sure.
So yeah, you've got a lot of depth. You got a lot of guys you can cycle in a meet like this, and but yeah, Bolin getting a couple of major decisions is a big deal. Hilligus starting out with a pin, so he's 2-0 with pins, and then he got a decision later. Correct. Yeah. So all in all, sounds like a good day.
And Latona, I'm telling you, very impressed with him at 125. I mean, the lower weights, and then Myers at 133, a rock, a graduate student. I mean, this just, a lot of pieces. A lot of wrestlers saw action. It wasn't like the same starting lineup from Campbell wrestling 3 times in a row. So,
Yep.
And then here's ACC play. The ACC duels start this Friday for Virginia Tech. Non-conference is done to the best of my knowledge. I'm trying to load the schedule right now. But North Carolina on this weekend for Virginia Tech. Of course, last year when Virginia Tech wrestled North Carolina, there was nearly, I think, like 3,000 to 4,000 people inside of Castle Coliseum. It was a disappointing loss to the Tar Heels.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this is a duel that Virginia Tech really wants to win.
Yes, and this one is on the road, and is it Friday or Saturday?
I believe it is Friday. I'm trying to pull up the schedule.
I think it's Friday evening, yeah. And
it's on the ACC network.
And it's on the ACC network. So
Yep, 6 o'clock p.m. on Friday, and again, the non-conference slate's over. So here you go, folks. At North Carolina, they're in the top 15. Virginia at home, and then Duke, and then North Carolina State and Pittsburgh to close things out.
Yeah, and as you look across the sports at Virginia Tech, there are certain teams you hate losing to. Like, I hate losing to Louisville in basketball. I don't dread the concept of playing Louisville in football, but I just can't stand them in basketball. I just and when I don't mind losing to NC State in wrestling, maybe even UVA in wrestling, but Virginia Tech should not be losing to UNC in wrestling.
No.
That's kind of how I look at that. So
the way we feel about UNC in football, Chris, is the way Tech fans feel about losing to UNC in wrestling. It's a very similar.
Yeah, like nobody wearing baby blue should be good at wrestling, right? I have a separate comment here. All right, so,
I love it. We're getting Chris into wrestling.
So wrestling. Now this is a scheduling standpoint. Every year wrestling starts normally in November or December, right?
Yeah, late
and
November.
This year it started in January. And every year the NCAA championships are the same week as the opening weekend of the NCAA basketball tournament.
Right.
Would it not be better for wrestling to start the first week of January, and that way you don't have to worry about Christmas break right in the middle of your season?
There's always a long break in wrestling right around Christmas.
And then you go and then you have the NCAA tournaments in April. Instead, you push everything back a month. Now, great. Then you've got spring break coming in the middle of your season, but it is what it is.
So wrestling struggles with bringing in new fans because it is I think for your layperson, it's a difficult sport to understand when you first look at it. So to your point, you're not going to draw new fans in if you're doing your man. I hope I'm not pissing off wrestling fans here, but you're not going to draw new fans if you're doing your big event at the same weekend that the NCAA tournament's going on.
Right.
So something to think about. We're not trying to start a huge movement here in NCAA wrestling. And by the way, the wrestling tournament.
It's so much fun.
Wow, it is.
And I do want to credit Coach Roby for a minute because I feel like he has done a terrific job since taking over of getting more Hokies excited about wrestling. I mean, and Mekhi Lewis winning a national championship helps. But
yes.
I just feel like there are more Hokies. Like, take you, for example, Will, who the last 4 years or so has started to, really grow to love wrestling.
If Tony Roby decided tomorrow that he didn't want to coach wrestling anymore, then the Hokie Club should just go ahead and hire him. He's a great salesman.
So to a counterpoint to what I just said, I remember saying last year on the podcast, you don't really even need to understand wrestling to watch it. It's one guy trying to beat another, and so don't be intimidated by I don't know what I'm looking at. And also the people on our wrestling board are very helpful.
They're terrific.
Come in and ask dumb questions. They love new fans. They'll answer.
I tell you what, I think I love a lot of boards who are subscribers are great, but maybe my favorite board is the wrestling board.
Yeah,
those folks are terrific. So, all right, last sport before we get to your questions here on episode 161 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. It's been a while since we talked about Virginia Tech women's basketball. Hokies got off to a strong start in the non-conference slate. They won their opener against Pittsburgh early December, and they've now lost 4 in a row in league play. Chris hosted number 2 Louisville on Thursday, trailed by 15, took a 2-point lead with 90 seconds left, ended up losing 71-67 to the 3-time defending ACC champions, had that game. And then on Sunday, a disappointing loss in Atlanta. They were up by 10 going to the fourth quarter and lost by 2.
The trend of the Kenny Brooks era is get a lead and then blow it in the fourth quarter. From his first year to what are we now?
You have a stat there, right?
Or 6th year.
That you read to us before we started the podcast about the women's program.
There's a stat since 2017-18 that the Virginia Tech has 1-11 in ACC games decided by 5 points or less.
Or fewer, yeah.
Right. So the Louisville game was kind of almost the opposite of that. Tech was behind and then roared back.
Yeah.
Normally it's Virginia Tech has a big lead and then they somehow manage to lose the game. I think Kenny Brooks has proven to be a really, really good recruiter. He's improved the talent level of the program. In-game, end-game coaching does not seem to be his strength, and unfortunately, that's very important because, unless you're like one of the elite teams that's in women's basketball that is up by 70 points every night, these games are going to be close, and you got to learn how to hold a lead. And here we are, well into his tenure, and they can't do it. So it's probably unrealistic to think of a switch is going to be flipped and they're going to start doing it overnight, right? This has been his entire tenure.
You want them to,
right?
This is a team that was slated to make the NCAA tournament a year ago for the first time since 2007. And so that was a really good team last year. And I tell you what, talent on this team, it's there. There's a really good 3-point shooting team. Liz Kitley's one of the best centers in the entire country. Leads the ACC in double-doubles. They've been right there. So I think they're better than their record shows in the ACC, but a disappointing loss on Sunday, no doubt.
There was a year, I guess it was 2 years ago, when they closed the season really, really strong.
Right.
But
they started 1-7, I believe.
They started 1-7, and there were so many of those games. I think they were beating UVA by like 15 points and lost, and there were several games like that in that losing streak where they were winning and then they lost. And so, like I said, it's a trend.
And I don't watch them enough to know what the issues are. I did see the end of the Georgia Tech game, and you go from tie ball game and you're inbounding the ball with 6.5 seconds left to go to with 2.8 seconds left to go, you're watching Georgia Tech shoot free throws to break the tie. And then the end of the Louisville game was, again, I believe Virginia Tech was down 2 with the ball.
With the ball, they could have helped. There was no shot clock, and Georgia Amore was just running, trying to take
getting
some time
ready
off
to initiate the offense out near half
and
court.
Dana Evans picked her pocket.
Yeah, so Amore is looking down into the entirety of the Tech offense, getting ready to initiate the play, and the Louisville player, one of the best players in the country, just picks her pocket, right there in front of God and everybody, and goes down and lays it in. So they definitely need to get better at the end game situations.
So, all right, we discussed 4 sports on today's show: men's basketball, football, women's basketball, and wrestling. But our favorite part is when we get to hear from you. Our YouTube live comment section, a lot of great stuff today. If you have a question, any sport, go ahead and drop it in the comment section. Let's go ahead and lead things off with Robert. Let's see, Daryl Tapp, the recruiting, player, alumni, outreach, and defensive line coach savior for VT football.
Who knows?
You can't ask one person to do all of that. I mean, if he is, then he has more energy than anybody in the world, basically. But yes, he's going to fill all of those roles to a certain extent. I don't think we've been able to tell how good of a staff Fuente's put together defensively in terms of recruiting. I think Hamilton, Ryan Smith, and Daryl Tapp are all very good, but they basically haven't been able to get out and recruit on the road. And there are some people. There's only so much you can do on Zoom. Some people you have to sit in a room with them to get a vibe. And Tapp had put together a plan for the coaching staff and in-state recruiting and things like that, and then they didn't get a chance to execute it because of COVID. So I don't know when recruiting restrictions are going to get lifted. I'm guessing not till the summer.
Yeah, it's April right now.
They currently run through April, right? I'm guessing maybe in the summer.
So then, by that point, you will have had over a year of no on-campus recruiting. Let me put it this way:
15 months.
Alex White just left Virginia Tech for North Carolina.
Her role
over the
was
weekend. Her role was the director of on-campus recruiting. She was hired last summer. During her time as director of on-campus recruiting at Virginia Tech, the Hokies did not host a single on-campus recruit. And
she has ties to North Carolina, I believe.
She went to North Carolina.
Yep. And now she's back.
Yeah. Anyway.
I think the question you're really asking is, can Daryl Tapp turn the tide of recruiting in the 757 for Virginia Tech? And that's a lot to put on one guy's shoulders.
Well,
North Carolina's got a head start.
North Carolina's got Dre Bly out there.
Right.
And Dre Bly is a great personality, and he's from the area and things like that. Tapp will help.
I'm not from that area. I would assume that Dre Bly is a bigger legend than Daryl Tapp.
No question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I looked outside the window. It's snowing here in Blacksburg, which
Oh,
is not
it's
snowing
expected.
pretty
Gosh,
heavily,
yeah.
actually.
I was hoping to go golfing later today. That's not going to happen.
You can go to Frank Beamer's house and play the
simulator.
That has a golf simulator.
Does he actually?
It has a
Wow,
golf
look at
simulator.
Eric Fisher chimes in, but can Couture draw charges like Deron Washington used to?
Well, David Cunningham keeps track of that stuff, and I think Couture's up to 10 charges on the season.
Yeah.
You know.
Not. I love Deron. Don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of flopping in there.
That's true.
If Deron had a Duke uniform on, all Tech fans would have hated him.
Yeah. So far, Hunter's legitimately getting knocked down.
Yeah.
Staying with basketball, Raj Suri asks, why aren't we seeing Joe Bamisile play for the men's basketball team?
Not ready yet.
Well, he's just not ready. He didn't play a senior year of high school. I know he was a highly touted recruit, but he didn't play a senior year of high school because he had knee surgery. He's well behind defensively right now. He's a talented player. Look, this is good. This is good that you don't have to have a freshman playing 30 minutes a game like Tech's had to do. It shows there's talent in the program. And again, if you want to put Joe Bamisile in the game, are you taking out Jaylen Cone? Right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
well, I think what everybody's worried about is that Bamisile's a top 100 recruit, and they're worried about if he's not playing, he's going to get upset and hit the transfer portal. Right? That's what we're talking about.
Sure.
And that I don't have an answer for that other than it speaks to what expectations, what conversations have occurred between him and Mike Young?
I think we're fine. His high school coach played with Mike Young in college.
And
that relationship is strong. He seems active and upbeat and happy on the bench.
And there was something in Tech Talk Live about the jokesters on the team. Isn't Bamasil one of them?
I know Maddox was one of them.
Maddox, yeah. Well, Bamasil seems to be comfortable, with where he is right now. And
I was reading, I guess it was Beatty, talking about how Bamasil's got him into things like meditation and yoga and things like that. He is a deep thinking dude. Like this is not your typical freshman.
Yeah.
So
let's bring him on the podcast to do some meditation.
Yeah, let's.
We're talking about doing different things in 2021.
Sure, Virginia Tech would go for that.
All right, final question. We'll do a football one. Billy Parvenham writes, do fans have unfair expectations with beating top football teams at home? People talk about how we haven't had a top 5 win, but those teams are good for a reason. Are we not on their level, or are there other factors?
Football is a physical sport, and generally speaking, in football, if you're really, really good, it's because you're bigger and faster and stronger than the other person. And generally, when you're bigger and faster and stronger than the guys lined up across from you, you're gonna win. Doesn't matter what the coaching.
In basketball, the 3-point shot or shooting in general is the great equalizer.
And the fact that everybody, plays freshmen so many minutes, or at least the top elite teams do.
You can get hot in basketball and upset a higher ranked team.
Right.
Like I think Virginia, I remember Seth Greenberg was 3-3 against number 1 ranked teams in his time here at Tech, and it should have been 4-2. Sean Dockery, and Mike Young has beaten two number 3 teams in a row.
Yeah.
But it's two different animals.
Football is just so physical dependent on. Football is closer to boxing than it is, than it is anything else. It's not to say that you suggest you can't pull upsets in football. Obviously, you can. But it's generally like when Oklahoma, who did Oklahoma lose to early this season?
It was Iowa State, I believe.
Yeah,
but that wasn't really an upset because
Iowa State turned out to be really good. There was somebody else Oklahoma lost to. But generally, when there's an upset, it's not about the team that does the upsetting. It's about the team with superior talent just not showing up.
Yeah.
Right, and just having a bad game. So Virginia Tech beating one of those teams, yes, Virginia Tech's going to have to play well and not turn the ball over and do everything right. But generally, they're dependent on the other team screwing up. Ohio State game in 2014 is your prime example. I mean, Ohio State was by far and away the best team in college football that year. Look what they did in Alabama, right? Then they crushed Alabama.
Well, they won the national championship.
Right. That game was more. I know people don't want to hear this. That game was more about Ohio State not playing well than it was.
Well, and Virginia Tech played really well.
Virginia Tech played really, really well, but Virginia Tech's A game still loses to Ohio State's A game by multiple touchdowns, right?
Yeah, Ohio State wasn't ready yet. Their defensive line wasn't ready for what Bud Foster was doing to them. I would answer it this way. I think yes, special teams play and turnovers can always enter into it, but if you want to straight up beat a higher ranked team, you have to have good line play, offensive and defensive line play, and you have to have really good quarterback play. So when you start watching a Virginia Tech team, like I thought Virginia Tech's offensive line this year
it was good enough.
Was the kind of line you can roll out against a top ranked team and have a decent game.
Mm-hmm.
When you start seeing lines like that on both sides of the ball, and Virginia Tech's got a really good experienced quarterback, that's when I think they have their best shot.
One more fun one, because it just got thrown in from Richie. Which basketball player, hypothetically, would make a great football player? Fun one to close. I like this question.
I would say Tyrese Radford. Defensive back.
Yeah, he's probably a defensive back.
I'm going Keve Aluma at tight end.
Bisa Beatty is a tank.
Beatty at running back?
I could see that.
Yeah.
Beatty is certainly Beatty's, 6 foot, 200 pounds, and he runs so much from playing basketball. He could be 210, 215 if he was a football player. And Beatty loves the weight room. All you got to do is look at him and tell that guy works extremely hard.
Yeah.
I would kind of like to see Beatty at running back, or maybe Mutts at tight end.
Radford's a tough dude, man. So I would say if I had to pick one guy, I'd say Radford.
I might actually go Bama Hill at wide receiver. I would, if I could go back in time, I would want Ahmed Hill at wide receiver.
Yeah.
6'5" and that fast. Oh yeah.
So Evan, did you know who Bimbo Coles is, right?
Of course.
Did you know that Bimbo Coles may have been a better defensive back than he was basketball player?
Did not know that.
He was a phenomenal athlete in high school. Defensive back. I played softball against him several times in the Tech softball system, and that guy had a cannon. He was an excellent softball player too.
And there was Devin Wilson was a two-sport athlete, correct, when he was here?
He was ran track.
He played wide receiver, didn't he?
Oh, Devin Wilson. I thought you said David Wilson. Yes. He played wide receiver for Virginia Tech.
Well,
Didn't play a lot.
He was a wide receiver.
Caught a few passes early in that season,
right.
yeah.
All right, well, a couple of great questions thrown in today. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in. One quick note, Mike Young's on the ACC teleconference right now. He says that he loves the punch that Jaylen Cone gives off the bench. No intention to start him anytime soon.
Okay.
My favorite quote, I consider him a starter, but to see that little rat run on the floor and come off some screens there, he offers us a lot. He's tricky, and I'm so thankful he's in a Hokie uniform. He's so fun to coach. He's awesome.
So right now, I know he has only played in 8 games. He missed the first 3. But would he be the ACC 6th man of the year right now? No, I'd have to go up and down everybody else's roster to figure that out. But I have to imagine that he would be a strong candidate at this point in time for ACC 6th man of the year, right? Assuming there is an award for 6th man of the year.
I believe there is.
I believe there is.
Yeah.
If there was, he would be a candidate, right?
There you have it.
Yeah.
All right, hour and a half worth of great content. Episode 161 of the Tech Sideline Podcast for Sports Discussed. We got to your YouTube live questions. If you didn't get yours in, don't worry. We'll be back soon, and you can get more questions in. But my favorite question is for Chris Coleman. I'm looking over at that calendar over there. See a lot of writing on it.
Yeah, I've got a Brandon Patterson article coming later today.
Nice.
What's he writing on? Any idea?
He wrote about Tay Daly, the transfer from Vanderbilt. He's going to do a breakdown of him and where he can help. We'll have another hoops column this week. That'll be, I think I'm generally going to write those on Thursdays, maybe Wednesday this week. There's also going to be an article this week, and I was going to bring the book in today, but I decided to wait until after I write the article to do it. But I interviewed Lou Johnston, the old Western Branch football coach, about his book, about his coaching career, which includes lots of good stories about the recruitments of guys like Chiron Stith at Virginia Tech.
Probably Vince
Hall. Vince Hall, or even Dre Bly, who came down to Virginia Tech and UNC in high school. And so I interviewed Lou about his book last week, and I'm going to run that article at some point this week. So I think that'll be a pretty good read, and that would be a good book for Virginia Tech fans to read because it'll contain some really good stories about past Virginia Tech players.
So Malcolm, camera on me.
Explain to our listeners, well, what do you have in your hands?
This is a very cool thing. It was the guys who did the grit gear were in Blacksburg this weekend, and they hit me up and we met out by the interstate, and they gave this to me. Very cool. It's aluminum, real thin.
You met out by the interstate and
met out by the interstate.
That didn't seem sketchy at all.
For those listening on the podcast, it is the shape of the United States with a
it's about
VT flag.
2 feet wide in aluminum with orange and maroon colors on it and a VT logo flag kind of thing.
It's fantastic.
Painted on. So the idea is Hokie Nation. It's very cool. I probably shouldn't show this because no, they're not publicly for sale. So just want to thank those guys for dropping it off, and it's I'm catching the light with it. It's very cool.
Yeah, you just made fun of everybody. You're like, look we
look
have
what
something
I got.
cool.
You
can't have it.
There's so much cool things on this podcast that the people would like to have.
Oh, and we have the new office. The computers got delivered last week and set up. We still have to clean up and configure those computers, but Chris and I should be over in the new office by the end of the week. Mm-hmm. And that's when we'll really start stripping this room down and adding some capability in here.
That's fantastic. And so is this podcast. Hour and a half worth of great content. Don't forget, you can follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Coleman TSL. You can follow Will on Twitter at Will Stewart TSL. At Tech Sideline is the main site. And those 3 accounts will be tweeting tomorrow night when Duke comes to town to take on Virginia Tech.
That's a quick turnaround, man.
That really is 48 hours, gentlemen. Any closing thoughts here?
Didn't Mike Young have time off though to work on Duke as well? I think they did. So I'm not worried about the quick turnaround.
When would he have had time off?
I don't know. I don't have the schedule.
Well, I mean, we did miss the UVA.
The UVA game, and he may have done some work ahead of that.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But Duke played on Saturday.
So I guess are we going to get Jake to do the Duke preview today? There you go. So that's another thing.
Jake Lyman, the hardest working man.
Yep.
He does a lot of writing.
Ultra fast transcriber too.
Yeah, no question. All right, that'll wrap things up for us. Episode 161 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Happy birthday, Malcolm Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, turning 22 years old today. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. We're at 22 likes right now. See if we can get to 30 before the end of the show. All right, that'll wrap things up for us. For our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the birthday boy, Malcolm Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land. My name is Evan Hughes, the podcast hosting so long, and thanks so much for watching and listening to episode 161 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Have a great week, Hokies.
Happy birthday to you.